Ivor Happen and the Christmas Question. It hit Ivor Happen in the middle of class, the solution to the question he endlessly asked of his parents, teachers, uncles, aunts, that he set out in letters sometimes whispered to plants. Is he real? The big man with bottomless gifts who sleds through the skies, rollicking and swift, and bellyfully laughs in a snazzy red fit, but was revered, it appeared, chiefly by kids, which was a thought as fishy and unhappy as Ivor could possibly have, poor chappie. So he thought no more thoughts, and got to it, snappy, a solution splendiferously tricky and trappy. He would snare the old fella, outwit him somehow, and as much as he loved him, show the whole town that Claus was a person as solid as ground, as real as grass, as likely as clouds. He read up, as far as little chaps can, on spying and hunting, some organised gangs, and started to scheme and plot and plan a ruse that would sure apprehend the man. He thought long as tinsel about how to do it, mulled hearths with tripwires, minced pies with glue bits, yet none of it seemed quite right for pursuing after all things so fiddly could prove his undoing. But that's when he thought of a present for Santa, 'cause whoever tries to enchant the enchanter? Something real wowzer, a gifting bonanza, and nothing's as bonanza as a big Christmas hamper. But that hamper could also contain something else, none other than our Ivor Happen himself, ready with Polaroid, dressed as an elf, one click, then all doubts once for all could be shelved. He saved up his pennies for 6 months or more, and took all his savings to the charity store, where he bought a cheap chest and a festive lot more, marzipan, eggnog, sweet treats galore. Then he filled that chest up and fashioned a bow out of glitter and paper and cuttings of clothes, and left a wee gap, through which he supposed he could peer out unseen in homespun elf clothes. For months he had plotted, so couldn't believe that now at long last it was Christmas Eve, though he stood for a second beside the pine tree, doubting a moment if he should proceed. But what harm could it do if he proved beyond question that Santa was real and no concessions? No one could say this was a transgression. Yes, his motives were sound for all this Claus questing. He wrote out a label to Santa with love, then stuck it with sticky with track-covering gloves, and yawning ostentatiously muttered to Mum, "Christmas tomorrow, I'll be up with the sun." In bed, he waited till the house grew still, parents retired and festive goodwill softening the town to sleep, until little Ivor crept creaturely from under the quilt. It was just past 11, and the clock clunked loudly as he slunk like a shadow down the hall past the pantry. Then he slipped in the hamper, sort of proudly, and waited, still silent as the town slept on soundly. He waited and waited. He got pins and needles. His arm went to sleep. His left knee felt feeble. He muttered times tables and alphabetized people. Perhaps Santa was stuck somewhere high up a steeple. Or maybe he didn't exist at all, was a figment, imagining, a story so tall no one could admit it, not anymore. In the box Ivor Happen felt suddenly small and silly, dressed in curly-toed slippers, huddled up hopeful and quiet as critters for nothing. In fact, he felt sort of bitter, and that moment decided to live life a quitter. He stretched out a leg and reached for the lid, but abruptly it struck him, just as he did, something had entered that room where he hid, a feeling he remembered as long as he lived. There was a big swoosh from somewhere beyond, and somehow a breeze blew and the notes of the song Jingle Bells rumbled on the old clock gong. A bright light shone for a mo, then was gone. Ivor stretched upwards, nudging out slow, peered out shaky, saw only shadow, though that shadow really was fully grown, shaped like a mountain or a megalith stone, and that mountain was heaving, strongly browed, with a face framed by cumulus looking down, and eyes that sparkled like lightning in clouds, above a vast chest like a great eider down. "What have we here?" it asked wryly, deep, a voice that would outmaneuver sleep, and laughed a line so broad and steep like rippling ravines as he started to speak. Ivor was speechless, stuttered a nothing, could not fathom standing there blushing that this was the chap he was after. His stuffing was not clean out by events we're discussing. Then he thought it. Camera! And he squirted round, fumbled in darkness down on the ground for a Polaroid camera that could not be found, while the shadow, it vanished as swiftly as sound. Still, he turned and said, "Cheese!" did Ivor nonplussed, and clicked in the air like a fellow concussed, capturing nothing with his handful of dust, knowing in an instant his plan was a bust. Santa, thought Ivor, still truthfully reeling, searching within for affirmative feeling. Was that really him, as tall as the ceiling? And as he was sat, afraid he was dreaming, he considered the presents, rotating them over, and was half on the way to regaining composure when a hand like a pillow touched down on his shoulder, and there was that Claus as big as a boulder. "My boy," he said with a glad bass boom that ruffled the cards and rippled the room, "what can it be that's so vital to you that you're up to no good at 1:45? Now, Ivor," he said with a tilt of the head, that Claus-nosed name should be taken as read, "I can see seeing me's more important than bed, so here I am truer than your garden shed. But, dearest, there's also so much to be said for maybes and mystery, for magical threads that can't quite be sewn up, just relished instead. Merry Christmas, my lad, I must to my sled!" And voom, little Ivor was back in his bed, feeling quite mirthful, though scratching his head, not terribly sure if what Claus had just said was a good thing, a true thing, or something he'd read, half remembered in dreaming or heard on a show. If what happened did happen, he just couldn't know. And there, all along, was the camera stowed, right plumb on the bedside, peaceful as snow. The clock gonged 3, and Ivor lay low, and gazed sleepy now at the frosty window. And as he was cozying from head down to toes, on the breeze, yes, surely, he heard, "Ho, ho! Ho, ho!"